Archaon the Everchosen, one of the most well-known names in all of Warhammer, not just fantasy. He's the leader of chaos that Abaddon wishes he was, the man that actually managed to bring the end times about, that defeated Order not once but twice if we're counting Age of Sigmar, where he beat Sigmar's head in so hard he lost Galmaraz and then had to lock himself in his realm so that chaos couldn't be mean to him anymore. Archaon is a main villain if Warhammer has ever had one. Besides the non-canon events of Storm of Chaos where Grimgor kicked him in the nuts so hard they burst, he's rarely ever taken an L, and is a character that is as compelling as he is powerful. It's not hard to be at least interested in his story, how he fell from being a loyal servant of Sigmar to his greatest enemy, how he conquered the other champions of chaos, how he managed to overcome any and all obstacles in front of him with sheer willpower and hatred. But what if Archaon didn't become the Everchosen? Scratch that, what if the man that would be world enemy number 1 never even fell to chaos? Just as we went through what if the goodest goody, Karl Franz, went bad, we'll now take a look at what if the Warhammer world's baddest baddie never turned to the dark powers. Welcome back to another Warhammer What If, Ghouls and Gals. This one is a biggie, as today we're going to be taking a look at Archaon. It took quite a bit of work to decide how exactly we get this better version of Archaon. That's because, in essence, he was sort of the ultimate Chaos Nepo baby. It was planned before his birth that he would be a pawn of the Dark Powers, as Be'lakor really wanted another Everchosen to come along. Despite their relationship later on in the setting, Be'lakor believed that if he was behind the creation of the next Everchosen, he might have some sway over him. As it turned out though, Archaon was a bit too chaotic, even for Chaos, as he found himself at odds with them from time to time, despite being blessed by the Chaos Gods. In the end times, for example, he banished the Lord of Change for questioning his plans, and he blew up the world, essentially cutting off the Chaos Gods from their main food source of souls. So let's work at this timeline then, shall we? Of course, there's the option to just not have Archaon be born, thus saving the world from being mega nuked. The only problem with that is that it just doesn't make for an interesting timeline, and it just means that Be'lakor would likely find a new innocent Nordlander lady for a Norse raider to knock up, leaving a cursed child to come into the world. I think we can start Archaon's story in the same way. He was created by a Norse raider sexually assaulting his mother during one of the many raids against Nordland, but at the moment of his birth we'll have our first major change. Rather than Archaon's birth be the death of his mother, I would have her live. His mother Victoria and her husband Roald would at first detest the child, the product of a senseless act of violence from a man Roald killed after finding him with his wife. However, the midwife who delivered Archaon into the world ensures that they are reminded he is just a baby. He does not know of the circumstances of his birth. He is a fresh start. There are times when Archaon's mother and father would rather not look at him, the pain being too great, but for a time he stays in Nordland. Guided mostly in his education by the midwife, he grows to be a young boy fascinated by the stories of Sigmar. He seems a true and kind soul, showing none of the brutish nature of his biological father. For a time, Archaon has a family. He isn't tossed from home to home as he is in the canon timeline, and instead enjoys somewhat of a normal childhood. However, when he reaches 12 years of age, his dreams of leaving home and becoming a great knight take over, forcing him to set out on his own to uncover his destiny. Already, we have ticked off 3 potential ends for Archaon. Be'lakor at this point had stopped Roald from protecting his wife, prevented Victoria from aborting Archaon, and stopped him from dying of fever as a child. It just goes to show how much work both I and Be'lakor are putting into keeping this child alive at this point. Someone else steps in to stop Archaon's story from ending early. As he finds himself at the Church of Sigmar, Archaon is nearly ambushed by a pack of wolves, only spared from them by a roaming priest Dagobert, who takes Archaon in and feeds him. Through Dagobert's kindness, again Archaon finds faith in the servants of Sigmar. He thought priests to be frail, rather useless things, but instead found Dagobert to be a man as great as any. Dagobert guides a young Archaon, a boy that is known as Diedrich to his friends and family, to pursue both his faith and nobility as a Templar of Sigmar. Archaon, side note, I'm going to be calling him Archaon throughout this point, but of course he'd be called Diedrich by everyone who knows him, serves as a squire to Sir Kastner, a fat, drunk, intemperate, womanizing Templar of Sigmar. Not setting the best example for Archaon, our young hero instead finds someone he can look up to in his fellow squire Nils, a boy who he grows close with. Nils isn't exactly the best example of an Empire man. He has a plan to get himself christened using Kastner's last name, thanks to a generous wife who likes to spend her husband's wealth on his bastard children. But this allows our rambunctious young Archaon to let loose a bit, to see that there's more to life than Sigmar and nobility, even if those remain the 2 things he holds dear. Archaon and Nils remain good friends for a few years until one day in the Drakenfels, Kastner and his two squires are ambushed by a band of roaming night goblins. Being anything but the noble knight he was supposed to be, Kastner dies while trying to run away from the goblins, abandoning the boys to their fate and falling into a trap in the forest floor. This experience might have disillusioned Archaon a bit had Nils not proven that heroes can still exist. Pushing Archaon out of the way of a poison arrow, Nils takes it instead. Knowing the poison will kill him in time, he gives Archaon the chance to escape, holding off the goblins for as long as he can while Archaon takes Kastner's horse and rides back to his estate, where he tells Kastner's wife that he is in fact one of his bastard sons, at which point he is christened Diedrich Kastner, and in the years that follow, Archaon does achieve his dream of becoming a Knight Templar of Sigmar. If we were being lazy, we could just end the story there. However, this is really just the beginning of Archaon's story, no matter if we're talking canon timeline or this one, as the Chaos influence doesn't reveal itself until after Archaon is a fully grown man. He spends years of his adult life believing he's a devout follower of Sigmar. While travelling the roads of Hochland, Archaon comes across a herd of beastmen preying on a young nun named Giselle. Archaon fights off the beastmen, but as he defeats their champion, a shard of warpstone breaks through his helmet, piercing his eye. He is carried back home by Giselle and his squires, with the nearby priest Dagobert arriving on the scene when he hears word of the news. Speaking with Giselle, Dagobert finds out she was carrying dangerous tomes filled with knowledge about chaos, tomes which also contained the heretical writings of the Tilian Necrodomo, the Insane. During this time, as Archaon fades from fever to unconsciousness and back to fever again, he is told that his village in Nordland was raided by Norsemen once more, and that his mother and father were killed. In the canon timeline, Archaon kills his family himself after becoming the Everchosen, but in this one, the loss of his family to Servants of Chaos only fuels a fire in his heart, especially as he was too injured to come to their aid, meaning he blames himself and Chaos for their deaths. Just as Archaon feels well enough to leave his bed, he overhears Dagobert and Giselle talking. They read through some of the words of Necrodomo the Insane, and Giselle is frightened at how many of the events leading to the selection of the next Everchosen have already come to pass. Giselle fears that the man they know as Diedrich will one day be the Everchosen. Dagobert seems to consider this at first, but then shakes his head. He tells Giselle no matter how far Archaon may fall in the course of his life, he is a pure soul and he would never turn his back on the Empire or Sigmar. In the canon timeline, Dagobert believes Giselle, which Archaon hears, therefore shattering his trust in the priest. In our timeline, their relationship remains. In both timelines, though, curiosity about the text gets the better of Archaon, and he journeys to Altdorf with Dagobert and Giselle to drop them off with the Grand Theogonist. There, Archaon reads the works of Necrodomo the Insane, just as Be'lakor intended. Rewinding a bit, when Necrodomo the Insane was writing his heretical texts, he wasn't exactly doing so with the clearest mind, hence the name Insane and all that, but he did have one clear hypothesis in his texts. Necrodomo wished to prove Sigmar was just a man, and nothing more. When he was imprisoned for these claims and driven further to insanity, Be'lakor finished off his works, making the Chaos Gods seem a bit more friendly in the process. In the canon timeline, these words drive Archaon insane as he suddenly realises he hates all gods and will use the powers of chaos to wipe them from the world. However, in our timeline, Archaon reads that Sigmar was just a man, but it matters little to him. So what if he was, Archaon thinks. Throughout his life, Archaon has known men who can do great things, who can be kind, noble and brave. There are men who can be the opposite too, yet he will not fall to the temptations of chaos. Not in this timeline, as he remembers the good he has experienced, the friends he has made, and the faith those he trusted had in him. He closes the text of Necrodomo and gets ready to meet back up with Dagobert and Giselle. However, as he returns to the streets of Altdorf, he finds an alley coated in shadow. He draws his sword and enters it, to find Be'lakor standing over the body of Dagobert, his blade stained with blood. Be'lakor says that Archaon should have been the one to do this, but he's had to step in. His plans have failed, but he can still make Archaon an Everchosen by force. Archaon, fueled by the hatred of chaos and the loss he's experienced in that alleyway, clashes blades with Be'lakor. The Demon Prince looks to have the upper hand, manipulating the warp shard in Archaon's face to try and make him mad, but Archaon fights back, eventually forcing Be'lakor to retreat back into the shadows. Giselle sees Archaon defeat Be'lakor and sees that she was wrong. He is not the Everchosen. He will not be tamed by chaos. Archaon, a man who now has the swelling confidence of one who has just slain one of the most powerful demons in the known world. Archaon, who calls himself Unbound, as he is now broken free of a destiny planted on him by the Chaos Gods. This is where our story could end, Ghouls and Gals, if you like. Archaon continues to serve Sigmar as one of his greatest Knights Templar. Perhaps he finds himself a personal bodyguard to the throne like Ludwig Schwarzhelm. Perhaps he heads out on his own, leading a band of devout warriors. Those are arguably fitting ends to this timeline, they're just not mine. Archaon, at least in my opinion, wouldn't be left unchanged from this experience, and with a warpstone chunk in his head, I still believe he's not going to be the perfect servant of Sigmar you might wish he was. In fact, Archaon believes himself much more than a servant, and thinks of himself as Sigmar reborn. With Giselle as his priest and preacher, he finds others that join his cult once they hear tell of the man who spat in the face of the Chaos Gods. Archaon's numbers swell as he believes that, like Sigmar, he should be the one to take the throne. It doesn't take much convincing for him to take the title of Emperor either, as the Emperor who was around when Archaon was born, one Dieter IV, was pretty rubbish. He let the War of Grom rampage through the Empire, took a bribe to give Marienburg back to its independence, and was in canon deposed by the Electocounts. So, when a hugely popular man who killed Be'lakor and defied chaos rocks up in Stirland with the support of the populace behind him, what else can the Electocounts do but concede the throne to a popular candidate? This not only sits Archaon on the throne, but also places a ripple effect on the world of Warhammer. Because Archaon takes the throne, Wilhelm the Wise doesn't, meaning Karl Franz's time never comes to pass. That's not the biggest issue anyways, as Archaon doesn't really want to give up the throne. The Warpstone extends his life, and during his long-lived rule, he leads the Empire into a new age. Not necessarily a better age, but one that's defined by a love of Sigmar, and a hatred of most of the gods, Chaos especially. I would see Archaon a bit like Warhammer 40,000's Emperor. He would have grand schemes, be a warrior none could hope to match, but to say he was wholly good would be a lie, simply. What do you think would happen if Archaon didn't fall to Chaos? I think I did the best I could with the story he has, but it does seem like he's meant to be the ultra-villain of everything to do with Warhammer Fantasy. As always, like if you liked, comment if you've got something to say, and subscribe if you want more. See ya!